The darkness was absolute, pressing in from all sides as I drove through the winding country roads that night. It had been raining earlier, and the pavement still glistened under my headlights, reflecting the beams back at me like a mirror. I remember checking the clock on my dashboard. 11:47 p.m. I was eager to get home after visiting my sister who lived 2 hours away. We had spent the day together, talking about life, our children, and our hopes for the future. Little did I know that my future was about to take a dramatic turn. I am Capri Parker, and this is the story of how I died and returned. The last thing I remember from that night was a flash of movement to my right, a split second of realization as a deer leapt onto the road. I swerved instinctively, desperately trying to avoid the collision. My tires lost their grip on the wet pavement, and my car spun wildly before crashing through the guardrail. There was a moment, suspended in time, where I felt weightless as my vehicle plummeted down the steep embankment. The crunch of metal, the shattering of glass, the violent snap as my seatbelt locked, and then nothing until everything. I was suddenly aware, but not in the way we're conscious in our daily lives. This was different, a clarity I had never experienced before. The pain was gone. The fear was gone. I felt completely untethered from all physical sensation. My first coherent thought was simple: I'm not in my car anymore. I found myself floating above the crash site. Below me, I could see flashing lights, red and blue, painting the trees and broken guardrail in alternating colors. Emergency responders moved with practiced urgency around a crumpled mass of metal that I somehow knew was my car. I watched as they worked frantically, cutting through the driver's side door. It was surreal to see them pull out a body. My body. Limp and broken. Blood streaked my face, and even from this vantage point, I could tell my injuries were severe. One of the paramedics shouted something I couldn't quite hear, and they immediately began CPR. I watched with detached fascination as they worked over me, pressing rhythmically on my chest, placing an oxygen mask over my face. I wanted to tell them not to worry, that I felt fine, better than fine actually, but I had no way to communicate with them. I wasn't afraid as I watched this scene unfold. Instead, I felt a profound sense of peace and understanding. This was simply the natural order of things. I had left my physical body behind, and whatever was happening now was meant to be. As I continued to observe, I became aware of a presence beside me. I turned, though not with a physical body, and saw soft, warm light. It wasn't blinding or overwhelming, just gently glowing with a pulsating rhythm that somehow felt alive. The light seemed to beckon to me, drawing me away from the accident scene and my broken body below. I felt no hesitation. I was ready to follow this light, to discover what lay beyond. As I moved toward it, not walking, but simply intending to be closer, the emergency scene below began to fade from my awareness. The paramedics, the flashing lights, the twisted metal of my car, all of it receded like a dream upon waking. The light grew stronger, forming what appeared to be a tunnel or pathway stretching out before me. It wasn't dark around the edges, as I might have expected. Rather, it was as if reality itself faded at the periphery of my awareness, with only this tunnel of radiant light remaining in focus. I moved forward, drawn by an inexplicable certainty that this was exactly where I needed to go. There was no fear, no doubt, just a profound sense of rightness about the journey I was undertaking. As I traveled through this tunnel of light, I became aware of sounds, not physical sounds, but something else, something like music, but more complex and beautiful than anything I'd ever heard before. It was as if joy itself had been transformed into sound, surrounding me and flowing through me. Time had no meaning in this place. I couldn't tell if I'd been traveling for seconds or centuries. But gradually, I became aware that the tunnel was opening up, expanding into a vast space filled with the same radiant light. And there, at the threshold between the tunnel and whatever lay beyond, I had my first encounter with another being. A figure stood waiting for me, glowing with the same warm light that had guided me through the tunnel. As I approached, the figure took on a more distinct appearance. It was a young man with kind eyes and a gentle smile, dressed in what seemed like flowing robes of light. I somehow knew, without being told, that this was my grandfather, who had passed away when I was just a child. "Capri," he said, though not with a physical voice. His words seemed to form directly in my understanding. "You've come earlier than expected." I didn't have a chance to respond before other figures emerged from the light around us. My grandmother, who had passed 5 years earlier, an uncle I had been close to as a child, and most surprisingly, a baby I instinctively knew was the child I had miscarried in my 20s. They all surrounded me with love and welcome, their joy at seeing me palpable in this strange new reality. My grandfather gestured toward the expanding light beyond us. "There's more to see," he said, "much more, but you need to understand something first." I waited, feeling no impatience, no anxiety. "What you're experiencing now is just the beginning," he continued. "You're at the threshold of eternity, but there's a choice coming. You'll be shown things, important things, and then you'll need to decide." "Decide what?" I asked, communicating somehow without physical speech. "Whether it's time for you to stay or if you need to return." Before I could ask more questions, my family members began to fade back into the light, their loving presence still surrounding me, but becoming less distinct. My grandfather was the last to fade, his kind eyes holding my gaze until the very end. I was alone again, but only for a moment. The light ahead beckoned, even stronger now, and I continued forward. As I moved deeper into this realm of light, I began to notice the environment changing around me. The formless radiance was taking shape, coalescing into what appeared to be a landscape of incredible beauty. I saw rolling meadows of flowers, unlike any I'd seen on Earth, their colors more vibrant and somehow containing depths I couldn't comprehend. Crystal clear streams flowed through the meadows, their waters sparkling with an inner light. In the distance, mountains rose majestically, their peaks seeming to touch the very firmament of heaven itself. The sky, if it could be called that, was not blue as on Earth, but rather a living tapestry of light and color that shifted and changed constantly, creating patterns of breathtaking beauty. Everything was suffused with light, but not the harsh, flat light of the physical world. This light had dimension and texture. It emanated from within everything rather than falling upon it from an external source. The beauty was overwhelming, but somehow my consciousness expanded to embrace it all without being consumed by it. I felt as though I was experiencing reality in its true form for the first time, unfiltered by the limitations of physical senses. As I took in this heavenly landscape, I became aware of others moving through it. Countless beings of light, some appearing human in form, others manifesting as patterns of pure luminescence. They moved with purpose and joy, engaged in activities I couldn't fully comprehend. There was a sense of community, of perfect harmony among these beings, each one uniquely individual, yet part of a greater whole. I moved among them, drawn forward by something I couldn't yet see, but could feel pulling at the very core of my being. As I traversed this heavenly realm, I began to notice something astonishing. I was retaining complete awareness of who I was, my memories, my identity, but simultaneously, I was expanding beyond that limited identity. It was as if layers of forgetting were being peeled away, revealing a more complete understanding of myself and my place in the grand tapestry of existence. Memories from my earthly life surfaced with perfect clarity, moments of joy and sorrow, love and regret. But here in this place, I could see how each experience had shaped me, how even the painful moments had served a purpose in my soul's journey. As these revelations washed over me, I became aware of a new presence approaching, a being of light far more radiant than any I had encountered thus far. The light emanating from this being was so pure, so intense, that in the physical world it would have been blinding. But here, my consciousness simply expanded to receive it, like a flower opening to the sun. The presence drew nearer, and I could feel waves of love washing over me. Love of such depth and purity that it seemed to reach into the very depths of my being, illuminating every hidden corner, every secret shame, every forgotten joy. In this love, there was no condemnation, only perfect acceptance and understanding. I was known, completely, utterly known, and yet loved without reservation or condition. And then came the voice, not a physical sound, but a communication that resonated through every part of my expanded consciousness. Capri, it said, you have come to the threshold of eternity. I knew with absolute certainty that I was in the presence of the divine. The transition from the tunnel of light to what came next was unlike anything I could have imagined. As the last traces of the tunnel faded away, I found myself in a realm that defied all earthly description. The limitations of human language make it nearly impossible to fully capture what I experienced, but I'll do my best to convey the essence of it. The first thing that struck me was the complete absence of time as we understand it. In our physical world, time moves in a linear fashion, past, present, future. But here, all moments seem to exist simultaneously. I could perceive what we might call the past and the future all at once, as if viewing a vast landscape where every point was equally accessible. This gave me a profound understanding of how limited our earthly perception truly is, how we experience only the thinnest slice of reality at any given moment. The space around me wasn't empty. It was filled with what I can only describe as living light. This wasn't just illumination as we know it on earth. This light had consciousness, purpose, intelligence. It flowed and moved with intention, responding to my presence, communicating without words. The colors within this light transcended the visible spectrum we know. There were hues I had never seen before, colors for which we have no names, each carrying its own meaning and emotional resonance. As I adjusted to this new reality, I became aware that I no longer had a physical body as I understood it, yet I wasn't without form. I existed as a pattern of energy, a complex interweaving of light and consciousness that retained my essential capriness while extending beyond the boundaries of my former physical self. I could sense every part of this new form, from what might correspond to a finger to the entirety of my being, all with equal clarity and precision. The most overwhelming aspect of this transition was the expansion of awareness that accompanied it. On Earth, our consciousness is focused through the narrow lens of our physical senses and brain. But here, freed from those limitations, my awareness expanded exponentially. I could perceive countless layers of reality simultaneously, from the smallest patterns of energy to vast cosmic structures that dwarfed galaxies. Information flowed into me freely, unfiltered by the cognitive bottlenecks of physical existence. This expanded perception revealed to me that I was far from alone in this realm. All around me, other beings of light moved and existed, some seemingly newly arrived like myself, others clearly ancient and vast in their consciousness. These beings communicated not through language, but through direct transmission of thought and emotion, a perfect sharing that left no room for misunderstanding. Several of these beings approached me, their energies mingling with mine in what felt like a cosmic embrace. Though they had no physical features as we understand them, I somehow recognized them. Souls I had known and loved in my earthly life who had passed before me. My grandfather, whose wisdom had guided me as a child. My childhood friend Thomas, who had died tragically young. An aunt whose gentle spirit had always comforted me. They welcomed me with joy that transcended any earthly happiness I had ever known. "We've been waiting for you," they communicated, their thoughts flowing directly into my consciousness. But not quite yet, not quite now. I understood their meaning instantly. I was being shown this realm, experiencing this transition, but it wasn't yet my time to remain here permanently. This revelation brought neither disappointment nor relief, merely acceptance and understanding. As I connected with these familiar souls, my awareness expanded even further. I began to perceive what I can only describe as the underlying structure of reality itself, the intricate patterns of energy and information that form the foundation of all existence. This structure wasn't cold or mechanical. It was alive with purpose and intelligence, imbued with what I recognized as divine love. In this state of expanded awareness, I began to understand that everything in creation, from the smallest subatomic particle to the largest cosmic structure, was interconnected, part of a vast, living system of relationships. Nothing existed in isolation. Everything affected everything else in an intricate dance of cause and effect that extended far beyond our limited earthly understanding of these concepts. This revelation brought with it a profound sense of responsibility. I could see how every choice I had made in my physical life had created ripples that affected countless other beings, some in ways I had recognized at the time, others in ways I could never have imagined. As I absorbed these insights, the realm around me began to shift and change. The living light became even more radiant, more purposeful, seeming to gather itself into a concentrated presence that approached me with unmistakable intention. The light before me intensified, gathering into a form that radiated love and wisdom beyond anything I had yet experienced. Though this being had no physical appearance as we understand it, I somehow perceived a face of extraordinary beauty, not in physical terms, but in terms of the perfect expression of love, wisdom, and compassion that it emanated. Capri Parker, child of creation, you stand now at the threshold of understanding. What you have experienced thus far is but the antechamber of eternity. Are you prepared to see more? Though no words were actually spoken, the meaning was perfectly clear. Without hesitation, my consciousness responded with affirmation. I was ready to proceed deeper into this mystery. The presence before me seemed pleased with my response. The light surrounding us began to change again, opening what I can only describe as a window or portal into a new dimension of experience. Through this opening, I could perceive a vast cosmic landscape unlike anything I had yet encountered. This, communicated the presence, is where creation and creator meet. Here, the boundaries between individual souls and the divine source begin to dissolve, allowing for direct communion with the eternal. As I gazed into this new realm, I began to perceive patterns of meaning and purpose that transcended individual existence. I could see how all souls were on journeys of growth and evolution, each following unique paths that nevertheless form part of a greater pattern, a divine tapestry of interconnected lives and purposes. In this expanded view, I could perceive what might be called the higher purpose of creation itself, not as a rigid plan or predetermined outcome, but as an ongoing process of discovery, growth, and the expansion of love and consciousness throughout all realms of existence. The beauty and complexity of this vision was overwhelming, yet my expanded consciousness was somehow able to embrace it without becoming lost. I felt both incredibly small in the face of such cosmic vastness and profoundly significant as a unique expression of divine creativity. As I absorbed this understanding, I became aware of another approaching, a radiance so pure, so perfect, that it seemed to gather all the light around us into itself. This new presence didn't diminish the first. Rather, they existed in perfect harmony, distinct yet unified in a way that transcended my understanding. I knew with absolute certainty who stood before me now. The light coalesced into a form that was simultaneously human and divine, a man of indescribable beauty and majesty, yet with eyes that reflected infinite compassion and understanding. He wore no crown, carried no scepter, yet his authority was unmistakable. This was Jesus Christ, not as depicted in paintings or described in sermons, but as he truly is, the perfect union of humanity and divinity. His eyes met mine, and in that gaze I experienced perfect love, a love that knew me completely, yet accepted me unconditionally, a love that had existed before my birth and would continue beyond the end of time itself. Capri, he said, I have always been with you, though you have not always known it. In that moment, I saw my entire life from his perspective. Every moment where he had walked beside me, guiding, protecting, waiting patiently for me to recognize his presence. I saw the times when I had turned to him in prayer and the times when I had turned away, seeking answers elsewhere. Through it all, his love had remained constant, unwavering, eternal. You have seen much, he continued, but there is more I would show you before you decide. With a gesture, he opened what I can only describe as a window into my own life, not as I had experienced it, but as it truly was in the grand pattern of existence. I saw the connections between my life and countless others, the ripples of influence extending far beyond what I had ever imagined. I saw moments where seemingly small acts of kindness or courage had altered the course of other lives in profound ways. I also saw missed opportunities, times when fear or selfishness had prevented me from fulfilling my potential. Every life, Jesus explained, is precious beyond measure, woven into the fabric of creation with divine purpose. Yours is no exception. He showed me potential futures, how my return might influence the lives of others, the work I might yet accomplish, the love I might yet share. These weren't fixed destinies, but possibilities, dependent on the choices I would make if I returned. The choice remains yours, he said. There is important work awaiting you on earth, but you have already fulfilled much of your purpose. You may remain here if you wish, and your absence will be honored and understood by those who were white. As I considered this, Jesus extended his hand toward me. Before you decide, there is one more thing you should know. With his touch, my consciousness expanded even further, and I perceived the true nature of reality with perfect clarity. I understood that the physical world and this spiritual realm weren't truly separate, but were different aspects of the same divine creation. The separation we perceive in physical life is an illusion born of our limited perspective. Whether you stay or return, Jesus said, you will never be apart from me or from those you love. All souls are eternally connected in ways that transcend physical distance and even death itself. With this understanding came perfect peace. Whatever I chose, nothing essential would be lost. Death was not an end, but a transition, a doorway between aspects of eternal existence. The most profound moment of my entire experience was my direct encounter with Jesus Christ. As his presence drew nearer, the very fabric of reality around me seemed to respond, becoming more vibrant, more alive. Colors intensified, the living light pulsed with greater purpose, and I felt my consciousness expand even further to receive him. When Jesus appeared before me, it wasn't as a distant, unapproachable deity, but as a living, present reality, more immediate than anything I had ever known. His appearance defied simple description. He was simultaneously majestic, beyond words, and intimately approachable. His face shone with a light that emanated from within, yet I could clearly discern his features, eyes of indescribable depth and compassion, a countenance that reflected perfect peace and authority. He wore simple robes of purest white, yet they seemed woven from light itself rather than any material substance. His hands, when he extended them toward me, bore the marks of crucifixion, not as bloody wounds, but as radiant emblems of sacrificial love, transformed into symbols of triumph and redemption. What struck me most powerfully was not his appearance, however, but his presence, the overwhelming love and truth that radiated from him. In his presence, I was completely known. Every thought, every action, every secret desire of my heart lay open before him. When he spoke my name, Capri, it resonated through my entire being as if he were calling forth my truest self, the person I was created to be beneath all the layers of fear, doubt, and selfishness that had accumulated throughout my life. His voice was unlike any I had ever heard. It contained both the gentle reassurance of a loving father and the unshakable authority of the creator of all things. I have always been with you, he told me, though you have not always known it. With these words, he opened my understanding to perceive my life from his perspective. I saw moments when I had sensed his presence, in the peace that had come during times of prayer, in the beauty of creation that had moved me to tears, in the love I had shared with others. But I also saw countless other moments when he had been there without my awareness, guiding, protecting, patiently waiting for me to turn to him. I saw times when I had actively rejected his guidance, choosing my own path out of pride or fear. Yet even in those moments, his love had never diminished. He had respected my freedom while continuing to work for my good in ways I could never have comprehended. The depth of this love overwhelmed me. In His presence, I understood that divine love is not merely an emotion, but the fundamental reality of existence, the power that creates, sustains, and redeems all things. This love was not soft or sentimental. It was stronger than death, more unyielding than the foundations of the universe itself. As Jesus continued to reveal Himself to me, I became aware of His dual nature, fully divine, yet fully human. In Him, these aspects existed in perfect harmony, neither diminishing the other. His humanity allowed Him to understand completely our struggles, fears, and temptations. His divinity enabled Him to overcome them and offer us the power to do the same. He extended His hands toward me, and I saw not only the marks of crucifixion, but also the power of resurrection that had transformed them. In that moment, I understood the central truth of existence, that love is stronger than death, that sacrifice leads to redemption, that what appears to be defeat can become the greatest victory. This is the pattern of true life, Jesus explained, not in words, but in direct understanding that flowed from His consciousness to mine. Death to self leads to resurrection. Surrender leads to freedom. Giving leads to receiving. This is the way I have made, and there is no other path to genuine life. As He spoke, I felt His words reshaping my understanding of everything I had experienced in my earthly life. Moments of suffering that had seemed meaningless were revealed as opportunities for growth and transformation. Relationships that had brought pain contained lessons about forgiveness and unconditional love. Even my greatest failures were shown to be potential turning points, invitations to surrender my pride and accept grace. Jesus, then, showed me something that left me breathless with wonder, the interconnectedness of all souls in His love. I saw humanity not as billions of separate individuals, but as a vast, living tapestry of relationships. With Christ at the center, His love flowing through every connection, sustaining the entire pattern. Each person was uniquely precious, known and loved perfectly by Him, yet also part of this greater whole. This is my body, He explained, indicating this living network of souls, not just the church as you have understood it, but all of humanity, called to become one in love as the Father and I are one. This revelation was not some abstract theological concept, but a living reality that I could directly perceive. The implications were staggering. Every person I had ever met, from closest family to casual acquaintances, was infinitely precious, worthy of respect and love simply by virtue of their existence as bearers of divine image. Jesus then turned His attention more directly to me, His gaze penetrating to the very core of my being. "Capri," He said, "you have seen much, but there is more for you to understand." With these words, He opened my awareness to perceive more deeply the purpose of my own life. I saw that I had been created with specific gifts, experiences, and perspectives that were uniquely mine, not for my own benefit, but as offerings to be shared for the good of others and the glory of God. Your life is not your own, Jesus explained gently. It is a gift given to you to be given away in love. In this light, the question of whether to return to my earthly life took on new significance. It wasn't simply about what I preferred or what would bring me the most immediate happiness. It was about purpose, about the unique contribution I was created to make in the grand pattern of existence. Jesus showed me potential futures, lives that might be touched, hearts that might be opened, love that might be shared if I chose to return. These weren't guaranteed outcomes, but possibilities dependent on my willingness to live in alignment with His purpose. The choice remains yours, He assured me. I force no one to follow the path I lay before them. Perfect love requires perfect freedom. As I considered this choice, Jesus drew even nearer, His presence enfolding me like an embrace. I felt His love flowing through every part of my being, healing ancient wounds, resolving inner conflicts, and Zrania bringing parts of myself I had rejected or feared into harmony with the whole. In His presence, I experienced what true wholeness feels like, not the absence of struggle or the fulfillment of every desire, but the integration of all aspects of self in love. The alignment of my being with its true purpose. This is salvation, Jesus explained. Not merely forgiveness of past wrongs or the promise of future reward, but transformation into your true self, the person you were created to be. This process begins in earthly life and continues eternally. With these words, He helped me understand that heaven wasn't primarily a place, but a state of perfect communion with God and with all creation, a state that could begin in this present moment and extend beyond physical death into eternity. As our encounter drew to its conclusion, Jesus placed His hands on my head in blessing. I felt power flowing from Him into me, not overwhelming or controlling, but strengthening, healing, preparing me for whatever lay ahead. Whether you stay or return, He said, remember this, you are eternally held in my love. Nothing can separate you from this love, not distance or time or circumstance, not failure or suffering, not even death itself. This is the truth that sets you free. With these words, He stepped back, joining the divine presence I had encountered earlier. Together, they waited for my decision, radiating love and acceptance that transcended any human emotion I had ever known. After what seemed like both an instant and an eternity, I made my choice. Though the beauty and peace of this realm were beyond anything I could have imagined, I sensed that my journey on earth was not yet complete. There were still lessons to learn, love to share, work to accomplish that could only be done in physical form. I will return, I said, not with words, but with the intention of my soul. Jesus smiled, a smile of such perfect understanding and love that it would forever remain imprinted on my consciousness. Then go with my blessing, He said. Carry what you have learned here back into the world. Remember that I am always with you, even when you cannot perceive my presence. The divine presence that had first greeted me added, the veil between worlds will be thinner for you now, Capri Parker. You will remember much of what you have seen, though not all. This is by design, for complete knowledge of eternal realities would make earthly life impossible to bear. Together, they extended their hands toward me in a gesture of blessing. I felt their love and light surrounding me, infusing every part of my being with strength and peace for the journey ahead. When the time comes for your permanent return, Jesus said, I will be waiting for you, as I wait for all my children. With these words, the realm of light began to recede, not fading exactly, but becoming more distant, as I felt myself being pulled back toward physical existence. The sensation was not painful, but there was a sense of increasing limitation, of consciousness being compressed back into the narrow channels of physical perception. The last thing I remember from that transition was Jesus' voice saying, remember, Capri, Love is the only truth that matters. Let it guide your every step. And then, with a sudden rush, I was back in the broken shell of my body, back in the world of time and space and physical sensation. Then came sensation, the hard surface beneath me, the pressure of hands on my chest, the cold rush of oxygen forced into my lungs. I could hear voices, urgent and professional. We've got a pulse. She's back. BP rising, 60-47 in Dike, 7:45. Pupils responsive. That's good. I wanted to speak, to tell them where I'd been, what I'd seen, but my body wouldn't respond. My lips wouldn't move. My voice wouldn't sound. I was trapped in broken flesh that refused to obey my will. As they lifted me onto a stretcher and into the ambulance, I drifted in and out of consciousness. In the moments of awareness, the contrast between where I had been and where I was now was stark and disorienting. The harsh lights, the noise, the pain, all of it seemed almost unbearably crude after the sublime perfection I had experienced. Yet even in this state, I wasn't afraid. I carried within me the absolute certainty that I was loved, that my life had purpose, and that death, when it eventually came, would not be an end, but a homecoming. In the hospital, I learned that I had been clinically dead for 18 minutes and 35 seconds before the paramedics had managed to restart my heart. The doctors were amazed that I had survived at all, and even more astonished that I showed no signs of brain damage, despite the extended period without oxygen. "You're a medical miracle, Mrs. Parker," one of them told me when I was finally stable enough to have visitors. "By all rights, you shouldn't be here, and certainly not with all your faculties intact." I smiled weakly, knowing that they couldn't understand if I tried to explain where I had been and what I had experienced during those 18 minutes and 35 seconds that my heart had not been beating. The memory of my encounter with Jesus remained vivid, a touchstone I returned to whenever fear or doubt threatened to overwhelm me. In those moments, I would recall his words, "You are eternally held in my love. Nothing can separate you from this love, not distance or time or circumstance, not failure or suffering, not even death itself." And I would find peace again, knowing that whatever challenges lay ahead, I was never truly alone. The journey continues, but now I walk it with the certainty of one who has glimpsed the destination, not as a distant hope, but as a present reality waiting to be fully embraced.